Excellent. So what are the critical data layers required to support Artemis map products? And the division here is the layers that are currently available and those that are on our wish list of things we would like. Mac mosaics, yeah. Regolith thickness, geotechnical properties.
Density doesn't matter.
1 centimeter pixel base map, that's quite an undertaking. Traffic jam.
Sorry, but I can put my, I want to put Relab and spectral libraries in the green sticks, but I can do it.
There's a menu on the right-hand side, and the fourth icon down, it looks like a little piece of paper with some stuff written on, like a sticky note. If you click on that, it generates a new one, and then you can edit it and color it and type in what you like and place it.
Yes. I
right
try to do it, but I can't do it.
And first you have to go to the Jamboard website. In the chat, there's a link for that.
I don't know why.
I wonder who put this. I don't mind putting people on the spot. Someone put in yellow regolith thickness as something we know.
Regular, yes.
Oh, that's me, Brad. And so this, I'm trying to think about, we don't know this, but any ideas about what that is? Again, I put a comment before, it's like anything versus nothing. And so even if we have to make estimates and ranges and getting at that kind of information, so I'm not saying that it's possible. I'm just saying that these are the kinds of things that we should be shooting for, and to have an idea, even if it is a guess, sometimes is going to be better than nothing at all.
Yeah, I mean, that one in particular, people have tried to suss it out in different ways, right? Like looked at nested craters that where you're punching through, or you have craters that are intersecting a regolith of various depths, and so you get these point maps, and it's obviously very spatially variable. And then there's the method that Matt Siegler and colleagues have done, looking at some of the Chang-U radiometer data.
Yep, undoubted. I mean, and so again, these are the quantities that we will need moving forward. I'm not saying that they are possible to get, or even that they're reasonable for different sites. And so it's just the information that we need to make some of these decisions moving forward. I'm trying to think about what, and we'll get into this in some of the next talks, is geotechnical properties, aggregate size, aggregate thickness, anything that is needed for civil development, like infrastructure development, anything like that. So what are the information? So we have two different things that are going on in these sticky notes: is the base maps that you use to derive information, and then the derived information. And so I think that those two things are great. I just want to capture the full range of things, whether they're possible or not. That's something that is, up for debate. And even then, when we look at some of these military geology maps, and again, not that we're salting the moon, but those military geology maps are really good at saying, we don't know some of these things, and so we're going to make an educated guess about them. And I think that those kinds of things are important.
Yeah. I see there's some in green there: mineral map from hyperspectral imaging data, geochemical map from hyperspectral imaging data. I'm just going back to the question about trying to suss out which pixels have high signal to noise. What fraction of pixels are you discarding in your sort of thresholding, Shuai, for the maps that you showed here?
So I mentioned a little bit in the chat box. So like, when I size the signal to noise ratio, I use the bands like the robust bands that won't change with time of day, like temporarily, because the data will collect like multiple times, right? So it's like, definitely you need to exclude the water bands because that's showing like kind of like a downward variation. Essentially I use like around from 0.5-ish to like 2.5-ish micron, and then mathematically give you a curve. You can use the second derivative to like estimate its roughness. So like how noisy, how like strong, how varied it is. Then pick up the best one. So like back to your question, I think for most of the Artemis landing zone, you pick up the best one from like more than 10, 20. Some area like closer pole, you can pick best one from like over 100 observations.
Okay.
Yeah. And then those are or like most of them were acquired when the mission still had its star tracker. So that means like the registration is just so great when the star tracker was still on. Unfortunately, the OP2C data, the best coverage one, it has some registration like a geodetic detected problem, like has some offset in the registration. But you can notice the offset mostly is like is still fine. So I prioritize the pixels with star tracker.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Are there plans to refly M cubed on any other platforms?
Trailblazer. Trailblazer will be launched later this year, or
A Trailblazer, that's right. Okay.
yeah. But that's unfortunately they do not have they cannot have a global coverage, but they can have like a targeted like a location. Say like if you want to see what's how the data look like at the Artemis zones, you can just target at the Artemis zones and then collect data and return back. It has a much better spatial and spectral resolution.
Yep.
Brad, and let me clarify. So when I wasn't following our own rules about this green versus yellow thing. So yeah, the things that I was putting in there was like, this is what we want to have, not the things that we do have. So clarify that. Thanks for pointing that out. Also, Trent Hare had pointed out a list of products that we do have. I'm going to put that in the link for everybody. That was something that was compiled by the Lunar SDI group that is out of USGS and other places. That might be helpful to show like these are the data layers that are available, mostly products that are being used to derive other products, but it could be really helpful. So thanks for helping me clarify my.
I mean, just in the, not quite 10 minutes, people have been populating this board here. I'm seeing a lot more green of things we need rather than yellow things we have. So if we're trying to think about potential options, which one might include in a Lunar critical data product call, there's a lot of stuff here. And there was a comment earlier in the earlier session about the title of my talk said geologic maps in there, but really, it should be more inclusive, right? Because the types of maps, as we heard yesterday, people talking about tactical maps, resource utilization maps, the need for intermediate scale mapping is not just geologic. That's a component of it, but it's clearly there's many other things that you need: boulders, slip angle measurements.
I saw like a radiation accumulation. That's also super interesting to me when we look at the mineral maps on the surface, because I showed you one of the slides showing the dichotomic distribution of hematite on the east-west facing slopes. So it's like it'd be great to have a kind of like a radiation accumulation measurements on the surface on two different types of facing slopes. And if our hypothesis is true, on the east-facing slopes, you should see more oxygen ions, like from Earth's upper atmosphere. I'm not sure that's the purpose of this kind of measurements, but definitely we can use it in that way if you can capture different like species of ions, electrons for the radiation accumulation measurements.
So these are oxygen ions that are streaming out of, you said streaming out of Earth's upper atmosphere?
Yeah, exactly. And if we can return samples for those hematite at a different age, that means we may be able to review what happened in past billions of years for Earth's atmosphere oxygen. If our hypothesis is correct.
Would you expect big asymmetries like latitudinally? I mean, you mentioned
Yes.
at the poles.
Yes. The near side has way more than the far side. That's where you're facing, the near side faces the Earth, right? So where you face the Earth, you have way more than the far side. And the east side, east facing slopes, it's easier to capture the oxygen ions. So that's why you see much more hematite exposure on the east facing slopes.
It's cool. Well, I look forward to your paper about that.
The hematite paper was out. I sent you a link in the chat.
That was the one. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's a second slide on the Jamboard with a second topic. Is that for this session or for a different session?
Brad, yeah, there's a second slide at the top. So this was our first prompting question, which has generated a ton of feedback, and everyone is still adding stickies to it. But there's also a second slide too for this discussion. So
Oh, apologies. Okay.
no, you're good. Yeah, there you go. And Ricky is hovering over it. Thank you, Ricky.
There we
Perfect.
go. Okay, so what are the methods and technical standards that should be implemented to ensure seamless access to map products as part of a larger planetary data ecosystem? So the two stickies are technical standards, and pink stickies are where to archive Artemis map products. NASA Science Standards, Journal of Maps, that's a good one. Has anyone published in the Journal of Maps?
There are some good maps by Galuzzi et al. For Mercury that are in Journal of Maps.
I've published in Journal of Maps.
Okay.
So there are definitely, I mean, Journal of Maps includes all different kinds of maps, right? And some of them tend to be, I mean, aside from geology. So there are some interesting maps, and a lot of them tend to be pretty high quality, but there are things like, you know, fairy mounds across, you know, Scotland or something like that. So they can be any kind of map, but I have seen USGS kind of prepared, you know, with topographic contours and all that, published as Journal of Maps. And so I do think it could be, when we talk about venues outside of the USGS, which I think is a reasonable thing for us to talk about for various reasons. One of them is the speed with which we can get those things out at the USGS, which is its own kind of conversation. But there's with Journal of Maps, and Alex, you can correct me if I'm wrong, they can publish the the data that goes along with it. So there's a comment about we need to have the vector data, which is absolutely true. But the review process is a little bit different. And so this is something to consider, but we definitely need another venue would be great, or another couple different venues, because journals don't tend to be really well, because when they get reviewed, they don't get edited all that much. Whereas when USGS reviews maps, we can force some edits that need to happen. And for other publication venues, we can't do that. And I do think that that's an important kind of component of the review process. Not always, but it certainly is a piece of that. Alex, maybe you can talk a little bit more about your experience with journals.
Yes, they accommodate release of GIS data, but they do not enforce it, and it is not hosted through them. You have to like link through whatever separate website you're hosting your data on. So it's a little like convoluted and not as straightforward, or your like editor isn't helping you with that the way USGS is helping you package and host the data. The review process is like any other journal that I've experienced. And I think it just depends on your editors on the map reviewing, but it is map specific subject matter experts.
Yeah. This question here, this pink sticky, I don't know who wrote this one, about is the PDS the wrong archive? Seems to me it's too unsuitable for many stakeholders. I think that's an excellent point and question. Does the author of that one care to comment?
I mean, inevitably that's me. I probably shouldn't be complaining about the PDS in public, but like, yeah, I mean, the idea that engineers from NASA are going to go pull the data and then remember to do all the things you need to do to data that's in the PDS to make it usable for analysis, I think is a mistake, because we've seen it fail too many times. Like the factor of 2 that's in the Lola header that you have to multiply by, and that's been repeatedly ignored. So I feel like, we don't want to rely on a standard that makes things too hard. Maybe do it somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I think the PDS, its intended archive is mainly for the raw data. I mean, yeah, the derived data products to some level, but we're talking about higher order products, so it's not just a topography map. Maybe you've defined thresholds for trafficability, and I don't even know if the PDS would be willing to take products like that. Yeah, so I also question if that's the most appropriate archive.
So
Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, Jim. This is Ross Byert, Setting Institute, NASA Ames. I was going to say, PDS will archive whatever you give them, right? But we need to go back and really talk about PDS as an archive place, a place where data will be kept for a bajillion years, versus maybe an archive that's more of a usability archive in the current venue. So it's not an either or. It's not PDS or not PDS. It's archive with PDS, but if the format that you archive in isn't usable, then also provide a usable version via some other place.
Under that, yeah, data access versus data archiving, data archival.
This is Fred Califf at JPL. Just to play on what Ross just said, I totally agree. The PDS could be the place, but it can't be solely an archive. You have to have analysis-ready data sets. I mean, you could have, and this is me, an analysis-ready archive, but that's expensive, and it means that as formats evolve, you need to evolve your whole archive, right? So anyways, yeah, I don't think PDS is the right place unless they get the proper support to support analysis-ready data sets as part of their deliverables.
Roger that. That's a good point, Fred. Okay, well, keeping an eye on the time here, I know this is the time we've allocated for our longer break, so folks can have lunch and do wonderful things like that. So I think we shall stick a pin in this discussion. Thank you all for contributing your discussion boards. These will be most useful for the post-meeting report that we're on the hook for writing. Any parting comments before we let things lie until 1:50? Going once, going twice, sold. Okay, thanks everybody. Talk to you in a few.
Thank you, Brad.